Hello and welcome to the Classical Next podcast, the global platform for the ideas and the people redefining classical and arts music worldwide. I'm your host, David Taylor. Today, I'm talking with Søren Mikael Rasmussen from culture consultants RasmussenNordic. RasmussenNordic help cultural institutions across Europe with knowledge, innovation, and strategy. They are the creators of Get More Audiences, Tools for Orchestras and Ensembles, with the Danish Orchestras and DEOO, Danish Ensembles, Orchestras and Opera. These tools were also created in conjunction with audience research groups, bringing some fascinating insights into the user journey and thought processes of audiences all along their customer journey. In this conversation, we dive into the challenges that art organisations face with audiences. We look at the toolkit and how it can be used to create a practical plan for developing audiences. And we also explore the challenges of bringing in innovation to the industry, what the user journey is for first-time audiences, and the benefits of creating offerings for your community. Right, that's enough from me. Let's jump in. Søren Mikael, it is so good to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, I've been really looking forward to this conversation as from chatting over the years, you've been one of the people really shining a light on not just a really audience-focused approach to classical music and orchestras, but an audience-informed approach through market research, chatting to audience members, and creating actual practical tools to help orchestras and people in the classical music world go forwards. But before we dive into this, I thought it'd be worth just touching on, in your own words, what RasmussenNordic does.
What we do, we do research in audience, of course, but we always do that in as a way to set direction for the strategy of audience development in an organization or in a group of organizations in music. And we work quite fiercely on implementing solutions in together with organizations, so that they can really benefit from what they have developed themselves. So we also help to make things work.
Really, really well summarized. So looking to the future, we've been having lots of challenges with audiences, particularly post-pandemic. What are some of the challenges that organisations have been facing with audiences at the moment that you found through both your work and from the wider world?
If we go back to the starting point with the COVID, for instance, there was this fear of losing all audiences. But I think that what has stick to a lot of organizations from that period is that they are very afraid of losing their core audiences. So they're a bit frightened, really. And being frightened is really not a good thing if you want to develop or you want to work with innovation. So I would say that one of the main barriers is very often the question, if I do this, will my core audience disappear? So that's really a barrier. And what is also a barrier, and it's very apparent, we work in Denmark and Norway, Scandinavia, a bit in Germany. Resources is a very huge barrier to development because people are very busy running around, selling the next tickets, putting the next program together, or just finding some people who can help them. So they have a hard time lifting their view and have a longer view into the future. That's also in a huge scale. That's also a problem for lots of organizations. They seem to run around, in the same kind of pattern every day and never get to the point where they develop something new, really.
Definitely. And with those challenges, a lot of the time we talk about the need for being better, but never really the how of improving.
Mm.
With your work and with RasmussenNordic's work, you've created a toolkit to give
Yeah.
people practical resources and tools to really challenge some of these things.
Yeah.
Before diving into what they are, how was the toolkit created? Because for me, I think this is one of the most fascinating things.
Yeah, the toolkit was created together with a lot of Danish chamber orchestras and symphony orchestras. In it was like in a capacity building project over 2 or 3 years with all of these music organization. Um, Firstly, people in this network, the Twitter network, started learning more about strategy and so on. And then at a point, we went into a phase together with them where we said, okay, so what is it you need to actually do audience development in your practical daily life? And then we sat down and we had a lot of data from Denmark about how where audiences seem to run into the wall if they want to buy a ticket and then bang their head and never wake up and go into a music hall again. So with that data together with what were the really daily needs of these orchestras to work with audience development, we created this tool set, and it was tested also together with the orchestra so that they were testing these step-by-step tools as we went along to create them. So they've been actually through a very good test period. And as we created them and wrote them together with the orchestras, they were already being implemented. So we got some experience back from the organizations already. So it's been tested, and I think the tools have been around now for 2 or 3 years. And an orchestra or chamber orchestra will have a kind of a special love for some of the tools, and some of the other tools they will never use. But the point is that you can use exactly the tool that you need to work with now. So it's very rooted in what you can say, what the orchestras, where they didn't know what to do. Yeah, exactly.
I can certainly imagine. Before diving into both the tools themselves and some of the impact, I'm really curious about that journey of co-creation with the orchestras. What was that like as a process? How on board were they with this is a whole concept? Because I know that sometimes in the classical music world, we're not always wanting to change the way we do things. How was it received during that process?
Yeah, it's a big question, David, because it was received in many ways. There's a difference when you work with, for instance, the management of the orchestras. Quite curious because they have to drive this organization and they have to develop, and they have lots of demands from funders and everything. So they're quite interested in finding some of these tools that can help them. But the process was also that my colleague and I were working together, I think over 10 organizations, and we worked in every organization as well. So we met a lot of musicians during this period and talked a lot with them about the tools, and they were using them themselves. And at that point, some resistant movements can build in an organization. But the tools themselves didn't build that kind of resistance. It's more the data around how audiences behave and what they want, what they like, is more to create resistance because the image of an audience is never the same as the audiences themselves. So there is a lot of friction sometimes when you get this data and you hear about what audiences appreciate around a concert or why they go, or does it have to fit with 2 seats at the local restaurant? Yes, it has, and so on. So they were more, resistant or annoyed about audiences and how they do things and why they come and why they don't. So but you combine your work with tools and data, because that's very important to work with these two things together, and that where resistance can come in, because people can get this fatigue and they say, I don't think we need to change anything. I mean, they come every Thursday, or at least 2/3 of the seat or half of the seats are sold on every Thursday. So they kind of get tired of thinking about the change. But basically, when people start working with the more practical tools to understand audiences, they normally get curious, but it takes a while. It's, as I said, I was at a conference yesterday and I said, well, audience development is really not that easy because you have to spend a bit more resources than you normally do. You have to change the way you work, and you don't know if what you do will work. So, it's like an unknown country at some point, and that, of course, creates some friction and some uncertainty about whether we should do this or not.
Really interesting. And I guess, like you were saying, there's sort of these resistances that come from some orchestras. But I imagine during that process, there might be some unexpected positives. Was there anything unexpected that came out of this that you were really pleasantly surprised by?
I think when people really starts to be curious about who is really sitting in the seats, I mean, something magical often happens in the room because they get really curious about, or to point where they get there, they get really curious and they really want to get their feedback. They really want to know who they are. So it creates, I would say, quite a big curiosity, and that sparks new ideas. So once you get over that kind of barrier, what you might call it, I've seen that people get really creative about how to do things, and they suddenly forget like 200 years of traditions and say, hey, we could do this and we could do this. So I know that there's so much creativity in these people and in these orchestras, and once you release it, a lot of things happen, good things.
I can really imagine. So we've spoken a lot about how the toolkit was created. It'd be great just to hear a little bit about what the toolkit is without giving away everything within it, because it'll be a very long podcast.
Yeah.
What is the toolkit, and what are some of your favorite takeaways from it?
I actually often say that a part of the toolkit is how to host digitally and how to host in the concert hall or at the event, and very, very important afterwards. So a quite important part of the tool is actually hosting, and that's also where a lot of people start because it's the most easy part, because you can think about how you want to be invited in yourself. So it's quite easy to kind of think about how you would welcome people or what your host should do or who should be hosting and so on. So a big takeaway, I would say, already from our experiences with this, is that that's something an organization can make work really fast. And they get so much positive feedback once they start changing how they work with their hosting. But what has, there are different themes in the tools, but I think what has sparked the most interest in the organization is actually the brand tools. Because our brand tools is more about identity and values than they are about, the color, the types, all of the things that define you visually. We don't work with that, but we work with lies underneath, and it has actually surprised me quite a lot, because that is something people are really interested in themselves. What is driving us? What are our values? Why are we in this world? What is our purpose? That is something people really would like to understand. And then very often, we say, okay, let's work with these tools. But firstly, let's ask your audiences how they see you. And they, of course, never see each other at the same point. So that, again, there is a wonderful room of friction there because, for instance, we had an orchestra saying, we are innovative. And then we, in different ways, asked the audiences, well, do you look at them as innovative? And they said, no, not at all. It's all about tradition. All right, maybe you should skip that part of your identity and move on and actually find a way to meet how your audiences see you and how you want to express yourself. So I think that's one of the tools that have really been developing since we wrote them, because people are very interested in this, because they really want to express who they are, and that's important for them. Yeah.
Yeah, and imagine branding as well is something we talk about a lot, but again, the idea of how to do something around branding is something that's often missing. It's usually sort of around
Yeah.
colors and fonts, but not really something that is both reflective that you can use to identify yourself and also how you can put it into action in a way that's meaningful.
Yeah, I think you're right, because some of the tools are about communication and storytelling, and I think they're very important because I mean, storytelling is very important for classical music, but people tend to be a bit more interested in the identity part, and I think that's a good sign, because as one of the orchestras who we were working with at the time said, we need to work with our brand. And then he said, no, hey, wait a minute, we need a brand. So the point was, are we really expressing anything else than we play classical music? And I think that's a kind of an insight a lot of orchestras certainly get, yeah, that you're not an orchestra just playing classical music. Well, if you are like everyone else. So people are looking for these specific signs of who they are.
Really fascinating. And does this potentially also apply to individual musicians when they're thinking about themselves? I was just thinking, as you were talking about, I'm a violinist who plays classical music, is then, well, I'm the same as every other violinist. Is this something that you can maybe do for yourself as an individual?
I think you can. I think you can. Actually, this fall we are running an innovation lab together with an organization in Copenhagen. It's called Sound, and they work with newly educated musicians. And I think you have done some work in this field yourself, and I think that younger musicians today are much more aware that they need to build a brand around themselves, but it can be hard because you've never been trained to do so uh, throughout your education. So uh, I think it works, and I think it's important as well for individual musicians or musicians who are building their own career, um, to stand out. It's so annoying that it has to be like this, but you know, you have to stand out in the crowd to make people um, see you and follow you. So I think it's important for everyone who wants to create a career, orchestra, individual. I think it's the same thing, really.
Much so. Well, one thing I've loved from your work is the work around user journeys or audience journeys when it's someone discovers the orchestra or a concert for the first time, all the way through to have attended the concerts. Can you tell me a little bit about the pathways and some of your favorite takeaways from that?
Yeah, you know, most people tend to think in this business, and it goes for a lot of other businesses as well, that what we do is the journey or is who we are. But they tend to forget that that any audience are very much considering whether they should go to a concert or an event. And that's the most important part of the user journey or guest journey, or what you would call it, because they haven't made a decision yet. It's not that they just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to a concert tonight at 8 p.m. It's going to be great. No, they have been considering different options. And this before journey is very important. I think that's why also some of the orchestras have been very interested in the brand or identity, because that is where they run into the wall, because what they meet is pictures, headlines that simply doesn't speak to them. So in that part of the journey, it's really important that you understand what they are looking for, what they want it to look like. Otherwise, you will never get people into a concert hall and get the experience part of the journey. So you have to be very focused on this storytelling about yourself and your event, and that's a pre-journey. And then the journey itself is very much about the concept, what kind of experience you design for your guests in the room or wherever it takes place. Um, and at the same time, what is the most neglected part of the user journey is actually the after part, because when we started doing research in this like 5, 6, 7 years ago, we asked people, okay, what do you do when the concert is over? And said, nothing. We are kicked out of the door by some student helper, and that's it. That is where you really have to work on building loyalty and to get people to come back and say, did you have a nice evening? And lots of people have been really working on this over the years. I think they're getting much better, but generally, a lot of people never send this email and say, thank you, we loved that you were together with us last night. Is there anything we can help you with? Is there anything here that could interest you to get back? Do you need a playlist or pictures or whatever from the concert? All of that stuff is very often neglected. And that is where you go from having a first timer who becomes a one timer. So that is the area you have to work in if you want to create second timers, which are the most interesting part of this. Yeah.
I'd never thought of the phrasing of one-timer before, and the fact that a first-timer can be a one-timer and never ever return, in essence.
Yeah, that happens, that is actually the standard. If you look at the US sales numbers, I think that 90% of concert goers never return. Only 10% return. So I don't think they have a bad experience, to be honest. Really, I don't think, because when we talk to people who go to concerts, even though they try it for the first time, it's very often a really good experience. So I think that this is we know for sure that people who go to a concert for the first time have a difficulty in choosing a concert because they don't know the repertoire, they don't know composers, and if you in your user journey have been talking about composers and conductors and everyone knows this piece, then of course you say, okay, it's not for me, So you really have to think carefully about these people who are not acquainted with this kind of music or this kind of experience, to help them all the way through and to get back. And that's one of the main explanations why people only come once, I believe, because they don't feel like they are part of it yet, and they don't really understand what's going on.
Definitely. And one of my favorite parts of your work and research is the bit about this user journey and people at the end of a concert saying, what do I do next? And that at no point have been very good in the way that Netflix is. You've watched this, you might also like this. We seem to release people out the door and assume they will go around and click on our website for something else. And actually, it may not be as simple as that.
Yeah, because it's like for a number of organizations, like you sell a one-off. No, you don't. You sell a relationship, and that's a very different thing. I think your metaphor with Netflix is perfect, because I mean it's hard to escape Netflix if you don't push the button 7 seconds. Then you get a new one. So and it's probably something Netflix knows would suit you, and that's it's a bit cheesy though, but you can do it in a more elegant way in this field, I believe.
Definitely. Well, the toolkit that you have is mainly available as a book and is now in multiple languages. I was really curious in when you've been receiving feedback or you've given talks on this. Are these ideas received differently in different markets and different countries?
Ah, um, I'm not sure that I can say that there is a different. It's more we've been talking about this of course, in Scandinavia, where we are rooted, in Germany, quite a lot in Germany, actually, a bit in the UK as well. Um, I think that all of the places, people tend to think, oh, do we really need to do this? Because they immediately can see that this will affect how we work, and this might affect our profession as an artist. So I think the reaction is pretty much the same everywhere we go. I'm afraid to say that, but also because this is a global community. This isn't, well, of course there are differences. You do this and this and this in that country, but generally musicians all over the world are more or less trained the same way. The formats of classical music, for instance, are more or less the same all around the world. So we haven't really detected yet that there are big differences.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of that question would be, are these tools that can work everywhere, or are they specific to different markets? Might be the other way around of thinking of it.
I think actually the language is really important. That sometimes the language and the style of it, you have to think about it. So it's more like, you don't have to, for instance, in Germany, the book is in German as well. So it's very important for people in Germany that they can use the tools in German, because it makes it can be a bit hard to translate it from English, or some northern German people speak a bit Danish, so they can use the Danish version. But it's very much more about that you feel comfortable and you really think you understand what is the point of this and what is the point of this, that you don't have to translate it. It's more that kind of thing. And then there are some small differences in where you want to start. For instance, we work quite a lot in Norway, and Norway is by far the country. I'm not sure about the UK, but they have so much data about the audience and on the public in general. So sometimes when we do development there, or are running a course or something, we can be much more rooted in data than we can be anywhere else, actually. So what we have spotted, let me put it in this way, is that we don't have enough tools for translating data into decisions. And that is something that is lacking in the book. There is a tool for building your own data collection, but we're currently working now to help people more step by step to use the data they do collect and put it into decisions. Because Norway has showed that is possible, I would say. So that's a difference.
And it's good. It's an iterative process as well, and we can
Yeah.
continue to build on it. Well, I just want to go back to something you were saying right at the beginning of this conversation, and that sometimes when you've been speaking with organizations, there's this concept that we just want to play to our core audience. They're the people we should really focus on. Do you think that's a sustainable business model, or by doing so, is it potentially something that could mean that an organization fails in future?
Well, I actually think it depends on where you live, what kind of community you are rooted in, because there's a very big difference whether, I would say, you are acting, or you are taking, you are active in a London area, Paris, Hamburg area, to some extent Copenhagen area, where there's quite, I would say, fierce competition, because there are many orchestras and you have to kind of stand out from one another. And then in smaller towns, local provincial towns, smaller areas, the competition is very different. So I would say, if you, and I think a lot of orchestras are rooted in more local settings, where there are no big cities around, you can thrive a bit better on your core audiences, because they probably come more often and therefore put more money in tickets. But generally, no, it's not a sustainable business model. I really don't think so. I think I've seen a lot of examples now where orchestras start to build like a second strand of concerts more aimed at other kinds of concert goers, maybe not that experienced concert goers. And in a couple of examples, I've already seen that this strand is growing faster and actually creating more revenue for an orchestra than the what can you say, the traditional strand. So for some orchestras, that is a way forward to think that maybe these kind of audience should never meet. Maybe you should just do what you do for your core audiences and then create some other stuff for the other people. The point is, though, that we've seen that quite often in actually in Norway as well, that if you do create some very specific concerts for new audiences, it's very, very hard to keep the core audiences out of the concert room anyway. They tend to buy the tickets right away because they want to experience this new thing as well. So, so I would say, I also said in the beginning that a lot of orchestras say, "Oh, will this frighten our core audiences?" And really, no, it probably won't. They probably will be quite curious about it too. And the point here is that core audiences have experienced so much music that if something new comes up, they say, "Finally, let's try it." So it's really never an issue with the core audience, but the issue is to build something else, different programming, different design, and take that risk. But if you don't take it, I mean, your business model could die really fast. That's what we see in Germany right now because there are heavy cutbacks on public funding for orchestras in Germany right now, and suddenly their business model is being very unstable.
I love the idea of the core audience actually being desperate for something a little bit different, that they're actually wanting a little bit of change. So I guess one thing you were saying there is about this sort of need to adopt new things, and a lot of what you do is with innovation labs and things like that. What do you see as some of the challenges or barriers to innovation in the industry?
I did touch a bit upon it when we started this talk. Um, I think that um, you know it's a mindset. So when you're in this business, you often replicate yourself day after day. You do the same thing. And the point is often that you don't think about doing the same thing because you just do it. So you're not aware. So I would say a barrier is that you are not aware of how you could do things differently because you're quite busy and you just have to do, and it worked the last time or almost worked the last time, so you can do it again. So you have a kind of a blind spot very often where you don't see things because you do them on your backbone. So you have to be curious about why you do what you do and how you do it. So that I would say that's a constraint. And then very often, I must say, I just been doing a number of interviews about this in Germany, and people work in silos. So someone is artistic responsible doing the program, someone is doing the marketing, someone is doing the production, some is doing the administration, and so on. But they hardly never speak together. And that's the rule more than there are exceptions, of course, but that's the rule basically. And working in these silos really doesn't help anyone. So I would say that's one of the really big challenges in the industry to work across professions, uh, and to be able to respect one another for what you bring to the table when you are thinking about the program or the brand or a campaign. whatever. So that's really a big constraint. And I think that I have to say this as well. Trained musicians, are trained in being artistically brilliant, and they're not being trained in understanding audiences or making marketing, but sometimes they think they do. So that is also a problem, that they kind of guess too much without knowing enough. So I would say that a constraint in this field is data, simply that you don't bring data into your organization, or if you do it, it's very little, or if you don't like what data is saying, you say, okay, well, that's probably wrong. Let's do it this way. So these are some of the really big constraints. Yeah.
Really good points. Well, it has been so much fun chatting to you. We just have two rapid fire questions
Right.
before
Fire
we
away.
finish. So the first one of those, kind of following on from what you were saying, if you could change one thing in the industry, what would it be and why?
All right. Wow. I think, well, yeah, I think if I could really change one big thing in the industry, it was forget traditions. Simply wipe them out, brainwash, forget traditions, and start over. How would you do a concert if you just, had no traditions you had to live up to? Yeah, that I would like to wipe that out.
Really
I'm
like that one.
now I'm being accused of killing history and heritage and everything because I don't want to do that. You the world is changing, I mean, all the time. So try to forget traditions because they look different tomorrow.
Really like that one. And then the final one is, what gives you hope for the future of classical music?
Oh, creativity, really. I mean, there's so much creativity in this industry. People have so many ideas, and I mean, I experience all the time that in this area, people are creative, they are inspired, they want to inspire, and they want to do people good. They're not in the business of hurting people or bullying people or putting people down. They are in this field to inspire and to create enjoyment and a lot of that stuff. And that's really something wonderful to work with music, and that is hope. I mean, that is really hope. Yeah.
I'd like to thank Søren Mikael Rasmussen from RasmussenNordic for joining me, and thank you for listening. If you have any thoughts on today's episode, or if there's someone you think I should be talking to for the show, you can find Classical Next on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, or just get in touch through the website. And if you have found the show useful, please do subscribe and share it with your colleagues. I'm David Taylor, and I'll see you next time.